Hi. So, let's understand first what is anxiety. Okay. Because when we want to overcome anxiety, first understand what is anxiety, what happens in your body, what happens in your mind when you are anxious. And is it a thought? Is it a feeling? What is it? Are you anxious? Is it a label that you're giving to yourself? Well, first thing first is I want you to understand anxiety is not stress. Anxiety is your mind and body's reaction to stressful, dangerous, or unfamiliar situations. And you are not anxious, you feel anxious. So separate anxiety to you, because you're separate and anxiety is different. What happens is every time you perceive or your brain perceives there is threat in the environment, the feeling, the uncomfortable feeling in your body starts coming up, and that is what we label as anxiety, right? So how does anxiety manifest in your space? It's manifest as an intense, excessive, persistent worry or fear that you experience in your space. And you may have palpitations, or you may have sweat, on your forehead, maybe on your palms, and it really deteriorates or interferes with your ability to function normally, as in take care of your environment, take care of the situations in a regular way. You often overreact when something triggers in your emotions. You can't control your responses to the situations, and it practically, physically, emotionally paralyzes you to take right kind of action. It paralyzes your decision making ability, and you start reacting from nowhere, and you wonder what's going wrong. Otherwise, perfectly, you will come up with a certain solution to a problem, but when you're anxious or when you feel anxious, the same problem becomes like a huge mountain in front of you, and you can't figure out a way. Now, why do you actually go through this repetitive uh, experience of feeling anxious? Now, the research says that the maximum reason for feeling anxious is deep down inside your brain, and that is something coming from your past. And it mostly said that if you're exposed to a certain kind of a emotional, physical, verbal, sexual trauma in your life, or if you have witnessed it or you have gone through it, there's a possibility that these traumatic events are deep seated in your brain, and you are at the higher risk of developing anxiety disorder at some point in life. Maybe you're really good at handling some things when you're an adult, but suddenly overnight you just start feeling anxious and you don't know what has happened. Now you got to figure out if you have had any sort of a traumatic experience in your life. Now when you look at anxiety, there's a cycle, right? So I want you to be a little more aware about this cycle. What happens exactly before you feel anxious? For you to tackle anxiety properly, for you to rewire your brain, and get rid of from anxiety permanently, you need to understand how does it start. It doesn't just start breaking out in sweat or palpitation. It starts much before that. The first step of anxiety cycle is when you start perceiving the danger in your environment. That's where you start, that there's a danger in front of you, and now you want to just run away from it. You want to escape avoiding those things. Like suppose you want to make that uncomfortable call or a confrontation or a talk to somebody, and you start seeing that there's a danger, because if you do this, there's a repercussion to it, and there's some problem might come up. And that's where what happens is you actually start avoiding that task. A surge of, the moment you avoid the task, there's a surge of relief that you experience in your life. And that surge of relief when you experience in your body, your brain gets hooked on to this cycle and avoid the situation by increasing anxiety. And that's where you start feeling that, it's kind of a signal for you to run away from that situation. Now, what are the four major effects that anxiety is causing on your brain and keeping you in this cycle again and again? So, the first effect of anxiety is it floods your brain with stress hormones. What are the stress hormones? Adrenaline and cortisol. When you feel anxious, your body goes on alert, prompting your brain to prepare yourself to either run away or fight from that situation. Now, in an attempt to help you fight off whatever has made you anxious, your brain sends a lot of adrenaline and cortisol to your central nervous system. Now, what does adrenaline and cortisol does? It gives you a lot of energy to either run or fight with that situation. It's like it increases the sugar levels of your body. It gives the energy sent to your limbs, your legs and your hands, so that you are in mode of fighting on that situation, or you're running from that situation. That's what happens. First thing is the changes in the brain that happens. The second change that you will experience, that once you're repetitively in this anxiety cycle, is it makes your brain hyperactive, towards the threats. Very hyperactive in terms of like how. So when you deal with anxiety on a consistent basis, your amygdala, there's this amygdala is are the two glands, almond shaped glands behind your, here at the back of your head, in the near the hypothalamus. That's a part of your brain. And amygdala grows larger when you are in a constant anxiety space. Amygdala is like your watchman, and this watchman is constantly, what is the job of the watchman? Constantly being on a lookout for any threat or in any problem, right? So what happens is, the moment the amygdala notices the potential danger, it sends signals to the hypothalamus, which triggers the fight and flight response. It is observed that the people, those who are constantly living in anxiety, their amygdala is very large and hypersensitive. That means it's going to be giving you wrong signal, a lot of false alarms. The third problem that the anxiety can cause in your brain is, it paralyzes your ability to think rationally. Ideally, what happens is, when there is a perceived danger in your space, and a perfectly normal human being, what happens is, the prefrontal cortex, that's your neocortex, come in the place the moment there's a danger, starts analyzing the situation, and makes a decision whether it's a real threatening situation, or am I just kind of making a big deal out of it. And it makes a decision to do what needs to be done. So you become more social oriented when there is a prefrontal cortex involved in it. But what happens when there is a constant anxiety in your space, it weakens the connection between amygdala and prefrontal cortex, making you taking all the wrong decisions based on your emotional impulse in that moment. Prefrontal cortex is like that wise counselor for your brain, and you stop listening to that wise counselor when you're consciously anxious. The fourth thing that the brain anxiety does to your brain is, it holds on to the negative memories. Whenever you are anxious, and if you're constantly under stress shrinks the hippocampus. Hippocampus processes your memories. Stress, when shrinks the hippocampus, what it does, it wires your brain to remember failure, threat and danger. And that's where you observe yourself when you're sitting alone and there's nobody around you. Suddenly you think of, the old things that have happened, the people those who have troubled you, or the events that didn't go well for you. Your happier memories, of success, achievement, safety, are buried deep inside your brain when you are constantly feeling this anxiety. And have you noticed that anxiety keeps coming back in the night, in the middle of the night, at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, when everything is quiet? So what happens is, your body in anxiety state is in a addicted to the hyper arousal state. And when the lights are out, and when world is quiet and you don't have any distractions in front of you, your body starts shifting into the natural circadian rhythm. The melatonin starts producing from your pineal gland, and melatonin induces sleep. And the moment the melatonin starts releasing in your brain, in your body, the part of your body which is addicted to this hyperarousal state, which happens because of the stress hormones of adrenaline and cortisol, it just kind of wakes up suddenly and says, hey, you know what, I don't want to go to sleep. This is not safe for me, this is not good for me, I have to fight, I have to run. And you get into that kind of a cycle where you are awake in the middle of the night and you don't know what to do. You're scared, you're fearful that something is going wrong. Now, what are the solutions? The first solution, the research says, is that when you're feeling anxious, accept. Just say, okay, don't run away from that feeling of anxiety. Just say, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. Recognize and understand your anxiety. So the moment you start feeling anxious, pick up your pen and paper and start journaling. Right now, my nervous system is kicking into high gear because maybe I'm worried about. So, what are the reasons that maybe you're worried about? Start finding the reasons behind that feeling. Now, I know it's difficult, and I know that it may not happen at that moment, but you have to train your brain to do so regularly. You do this every day before you go to sleep, and within 30 days, you will experience a difference. Stop criticizing yourself for feeling those anxious feelings. It's okay to feel anxious. Everybody goes through anxiety some other time. Remember that your anxiety is not paralyzing you, you're allowing it to paralyze it. So what you have to tell yourself is, you have to remind yourself of the times in the past that even though you were anxious, you still performed well. Now remember, quality of your sleep is very, very critical when you're anxious, or because of your compromised quality of sleep, you might get in anxiety. So start taking cold showers 15 minutes before your sleeping time. Make sure that you do everything, the maybe the right kind of a music, switch off all the social media before 2 hours, put yourself into the lavender aroma oil and just go to sleep. Okay? Remember to breathe well and follow the 3 by 3 by 3 rule. Write this down. A very simple way to change your focus is by start looking at 3 things that are in your environment. Then start naming those 3 things that you see. The second step is start listening to the 3 things. Could be AC, could be fan, could be some distant noise that you hear. 3 things, start them writing down. And then the last 3 things is 3 things that you feel: the clothes that you have, the bed that you have under you. So 3 things, maybe touching your fingers, maybe clenching and releasing your shoulders. 333. So my suggestion is, follow all of this and do let me know, how do you feel?